I've been looking for that.
I've said in the past that I refuse to hate watch a movie. Like every movie that I go in with the best of intentions. I'm hoping that this movie is going to be fantastic. But I have to admit, this one was a bit of a struggle. I was very wary of this film from the beginning, and so I kind of procrastinated watching this for longer than I kind of anticipated. Run Rabbit Run is a 2023 movie about a woman who's experiencing a series of strange behaviors from her 7-year-old daughter, Mia, that force her to come to terms with the traumas from her own past. Now, this one's going to be a little bit of a different review in the sense that I'm not really going to talk too much about the plot in this one. Like, I'm basically just going to keep this brief, which, to be honest, is a bit more than what this movie did. The movie centers around Sarah, who's a doctor and a divorced mother of a 7-year-old girl, Mia. And then one day things just start happening. And I don't really know how else to really describe it. Like, I know in all movies, there is something that kicks off the plot. But in this movie, as far as I can tell, it doesn't have any. What they call in writing terms an inciting incident. Seemingly, everything is fine, and then all of a sudden, it's just not. And what's not fine in this instance is the daughter, Mia, who starts acting kind of very strangely. And this continues to happen throughout the entire movie until we find out why at the end. Even though there's more than enough cards showing throughout the movie that the audience is way ahead of Sarah by the time she gets to it, despite the amount of forced symbolism it tries to throw in order to make it seem deeper than it actually is. So to me, this movie really felt like someone watched The Babadook and wanted to make one just like it, but then missed the point of what made The Babadook so good. Like, the parallels of these two movies are definitely here. Like, Babadook dealt with unresolved grief, whereas this deals with unresolved guilt. Both have a petulant child that pushes the buttons of the mother to the extreme. Of course, the difference here, though, is that the Babadook worked on a more literal level with this book that arrived that was the inciting incident of the story, and the child was used as sort of just another pressure point on Amelia, who is played by the amazing Essie Davis. In this, the child is the main source of conflict, and it kind of dances around the point for so long, filling the screen with attempts at creepy imagery. Like, hey, I get it. Kids in masks are creepy. But have something more than that, please. Like, it all feels like classic and then filmmaking.
It's a really simple rule that maybe you guys have all heard before, but we can take these beats, which are basically the beats of your outline, and if the words "and then" belong between those beats, you're f***ed. What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word "therefore" or "but." It should be "this happens, and therefore this happens. But this happens, therefore this happens."
Now, for all the movies that I watch, I usually actually don't see plot twists or reveals coming down the road. Like, I can still get sucked into the present tense of a film. But with this, I thought it was pretty obvious what was happening at only the halfway point, which means for much of the second half of the movie, I was just waiting for Sarah to play catch up because the story really can't go forward until that happens. So whereas The Babadook, the story seemed like a straightforward demon monster movie, and then it wasn't until it was all kind of put together in context that I saw the sort of allegory for grief. This movie feels like it doesn't have enough of a top layer to keep people entertained on its own, while trying to have this sort of subtextual driving force underneath. So I just feel it constantly is worried that people aren't going to be able to follow along, and so it inserts these story markers about what's happening, which in the end gives away too much information too early. So there's really little left to discover by the time you get to the big reveal at the end. The movie attempts to kind of cover this up with sort of these lots of slow motion, kind of artsy beauty shots, but that only really works if the connection to the story is there, which for me, it just wasn't. But the biggest problem for me is there just doesn't appear to be any sort of character arc in this film. Like, it tries to have one for Sarah, but it mistakes an audience reveal for a character arc. Like what we find out in the end is something that Sarah already knows in the beginning. So it's not like she had to come to terms with anything. We are just clued into it now. But for her, nothing has changed from the first frame of the movie to the last frame of the movie. I mean, she had to deal with some repercussions, I guess. But even that's kind of unclear. And there's no real sign that anything was really resolved, or why, for that matter. I will say the saving grace of this film is clearly everything outside of the story. Like the performances from both Sarah Snook and the little girl who plays Nia, Lily Latour, are fantastic. And the look and feel of this movie, although it's a bit on the gray and drab style, I think it goes a long way of setting the tone and mood of the film. The patience in the shots, the lighting, even the music is expertly done to create a style that really is impressive. However, there does come a time where that patience needs to pay off, and that's where this movie falters. It just needed a story that felt a little more fleshed out. This ends up getting into that horror film trope of feeling like a very long short film instead of a feature film. I'd give it a B minus, but let me know what you think.